Шановні пані і панове, ми
Ladies and gentlemen, we begin our last briefing. I invite Mr. Igor Burakovsky. He's a Ukrainian economist, a doctor of economic sciences, and the head of board of the Institute of Economic Research and Political Consulting, and will speak about on free trade area with EU.
Mr. Igor Burakovsky, the head of the board of the Institute for Economic Research and Political Consulting, doctor of economic sciences and professor of economics at the National University Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. We will speak with Mr. Igor on all the issues, challenges, perspectives linked to the free trade agreement with the European Union.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank my colleagues from Ukraine Crisis Media Center for this opportunity to talk to you and to share my thoughts about what we'll get on the 27th and after. On the 27th of June, it is planned to sign an agreement, an economic part on the associative agreement. And I would like to tell you right away that that is a very big document. Economic part can be divided in two components. The first component that is the issues related to sectoral cooperation. Sectors include not only just industries of economy, but cooperation on finances, in public procurements, on statistics. So such things which serve to economy. On the other hand, some articles, some parts dedicated to issues of free trade zone between Ukraine and EU. So if we speak about an economic part, and we see it's an enhanced agreement on a free trade area, it's not that true, because this is very important in the construction of agreement on the association, but economic part doesn't stop there. The second point I would like to emphasize, these articles have different power. There are articles which speak about principles and principles of cooperation, but with such a without big details. During implementation of these agreements, we Europeans and Ukrainians will have to look for formats, how to implement those spheres which are interesting for both parties, like issues related to macroeconomics, policy, cooperation in such fields as metallurgy and many other things. The second part includes articles with concrete commitments of EU and Ukraine. And I would like to dwell on that a little bit later. I would like to tell you that we must not demonize the association agreement and its economic part as a chance for modernizing the country and as a chance to change our internal economic policy. We should not undervalue it, but also we should not overvalue it. The fact of signing it speaks about intentions of both parties to cooperate, and it will depend on intensity, which potentially we can realize during our cooperation. If to be brief, in my opinion, at present, the agreement potentially should bring to some impacts. The first effect, opening of markets. Why? Because EU in May they introduced the system of autonomic preferences. That is the first step, or half of a step on the way to implement agreement asymmetrically. So EU now reduced or cancelled for some goods like import fees and that barrier, which was quite serious for some Ukrainian producers. We overcame it. We can say there is one-side liberalization of access of Ukrainian goods to European markets. I would like to tell you right away that according to our calculations, we don't expect a big wave of import. And after the agreement is signed, nothing will stop in Ukraine, and that is a myth and that is a propaganda. And I would like to tell you that opening markets will be asymmetrical. For many goods, for many items, industrial, agriculture, EU takes the responsibility to open markets during 1, 2, 3 years, depending on concrete items. It's difficult to be concrete here because that's 1,000 of documents, pages of documents, and there are some comments for certain items. The second point is Ukrainian producers and Ukrainian market we will open asymmetrically. So we will have less tense schedule of opening our markets. For some goods, it will open our market during 3, 5, 10 years. Import fees are not high in Ukraine for EU, and because of that we cannot say that cancel those fees. We don't say that was a big problem for European producers. No, but everybody would like to have better conditions for access on the markets. There are some other technical details related to the trade, but from EU there are some things which are very important, and one of them I would like to name: trade with agriculture products. We always told that Ukrainian producers and European producers on international markets are not under equal conditions because EU subsidizes export of agriculture products. We have an agreement that goods which will be exported, agriculture goods which will be exported to Ukraine, they will not be subsidized. So in such a way, those people and companies which will bring European agriculture products, they will have the same conditions as Ukrainian producers, and that's a very serious step. It's not easy for EU, but it will be done. Right away, I would like to mention that in addition to trade, that sectoral cooperation includes 28 different industries, and there is one very important, in my opinion, detail. It is provided that Ukraine will participate in EU bodies that function in, I speak about specialized bodies. I don't speak about the EU Parliament, the EU Commission. Will not be represented there, and it's quite clear we will not be members of EU. But those bodies which are responsible for certification, for technical regulations, and we will, on one hand, we will directly we'll know about changes that, and also cooperation with those bodies gives a chance to raise our questions if they come up during the process of implementations. In my opinion, the main part, economic part, is not that free trade and issues with import duties, but harmonizing Ukrainian legislation with European. There are 350 documents, regulations of EU Commission, and some other legislations of EU, and that legislation can be divided into two parts. For some industries, we take commitment to harmonize our legislation with EU legislation on the basic level. So if there is a EU law on basics of technical regulation, that we will implement that law in Ukraine, and then we build our national legislation on the basis of that. There are some documents and on which we agree that will support high level of correspondence of our legislation to European. It means that we will pass a basic law, and if there will be amendments in the EU, we will take those changes and documents to Ukraine and to Ukrainian legislation. Many people say that it means that the opinion will be imposed, so rules of the game will be imposed. I wanted to tell you that the EU, even no rules of the game on Ukrainian market have their own. We have rules, and that practice in EU, there's the best practice of state public governance, best practices of economic policy. I don't see any problem. I don't believe that through external pressure they will change our regulatory environment, which is bad. And in this presenter and my colleagues in other media, They told the problems our business is facing: corruption, too many regulations, bureaucracy, and non-efficiency of public bodies, and I continue that list. I would like to tell you that this agreement, on one hand, has general principles and general directions, what we and how we will do it, but it has some details. For Ukraine, in the part about custom cooperation, there is a very interesting phrase. The parties will refuse the practice of compulsory services of customs brokers. For EU to impose our games is not a typical practice, and we know that a lot of schemes of the previous government, of the previous regime, were built on that you could clear your cargoes only if you go to Mr. X or Mr. A, who is a customs broker. All the rest, I didn't have such a chance. So such a rule, such a principle, it was because of European exporters who work in Ukraine, who produce goods here and export them to EU. And there are a lot of similar details. There are some aspects related to harmonizing our legislation on customs, and also very often there is a question of a simplified system of taxation. If you look at articles of the agreement on taxation, it says nothing about simplified taxation, but at the same time, there are concrete obligations related to small and mid-level business. And the main idea is small and mid business and big business administrative resources should be provided but not imposed. Imposed in the way the decisions of different administrative bodies should be challenged in a court for reasonable price without stopping business for that. It's very important because when there is any dispute, they can stop a business, and even if I win the dispute with the state, and my business may die in several months. So there are many of similar things which are clear for us. We have them in our programs of reforms, but it's very important that now there will be like a commitment of Ukraine according to the international agreement. You have to speak in general. Which spheres will come to which spheres harmonization will come? First of all, it's environment. Among 350 documents I mentioned, about 80 are documents on protection of environment, but not in general, like fighting pollution, punishing those who pollute, etc. Now, this align a whole number of directives of European Commission and decisions of EU, which is about the technology of production. If a Ukrainian producer makes very good meat, and if they export it to EU, they may not stop it if they find that the waste from that meat, they dig them in very
so for companies working like that, it will be a clear sign that they won't be able to allude to unequal economic competition. And there are many more things to that, and they are equally important. And because of that, I'd like to tell you that this agreement will surely require lots of efforts from all the stakeholders. And surely business is one of these stakeholders, and many of regulations to be implemented in Ukraine will tackle not just the produce, particularly the produce exported to the EU, but rather to internal domestic regulatory framework And also we should be mindful of not just all European standards, but also lower level standards, corporate even standards, whether it is about a biller chain or other bigger structures. It will be really a challenge to estimate the costs of that adaptation for Ukrainian businesses. But effectively, we should regard this as an investment into our future. And still, the producers will have the choice of either continuing with their local customs and local traditions, forgetting about external markets, or they will have to comply with applicable European market requirements. Speaking about statewide responsibilities, it will be about a range of implementation programs, particularly in terms of harmonization and rapprochement of the Ukrainian legislation to that of the EU. It will be necessary to provide for proper analysis of the directives and the cost of the implementation, because there are no free actions, whether political or economic, and we will have to understand how much it will cost and who will compensate these. Either it will be the state or companies or both. And to here we should add technical aspects of quality assurance. It is about proper technical regulation, testing laboratories, and it will require a great deal of work for Ukraine. A lot of things will need to be done in the field of taxation, fiscal policy, in the area of public procurement. Given that we are still not members of the EU, the companies from Ukraine willing to become involved into procurement procedures in the EU will need to comply and provide actually proof of their compliance with applicable EU standards. On the other hand, the positive thing is that the European market is really attractive and works at par with EU, yes, Chinese and other global markets. The process of agreement implementation will bring more problems. Conceivably, it will be like that. The agreement provides for a rather ramificated system of compliance institutions and tools, and there will be work groups established at the sectoral level, at regional levels, and they will become the instrument to accumulate and prioritize issues of Ukrainian producers, Ukrainian manufacturers, and it will also work on mitigating these issues in collaboration with relevant EU authorities. And I'd like to finalize with my brief comment as to how we should appreciate and evaluate the agreement itself. First of all, the signing of the agreement will not mean that there are some bullion available for Ukraine immediately after the signature. It is rather about a very comprehensive and complex work. My second conclusion is that as of today, many companies who already operate on the European market and those willing to come to that market, they should regard this involvement in European markets as a sign of quality, if you want. Those who trade with the EU markets with the United States or with, say, Switzerland, they already know of high level of competition there, so that the very fact of them operating on these markets can really be regarded as a sign of quality and competitiveness. On the other hand, there is a need for really proactive explanatory work to be carried out by the government of Ukraine as well, because the public needs more clear-cut and detailed information about the agreement. Even more so can be said about business circles. From my experience of communication with Ukrainian business persons before the Vilnius summit and other such events, I can tell you that there are businesses who really are afraid of such cooperation efforts, and there are those really looking into new possibilities. But regardless of that, the time has come for us to make this final decision whether we want to go to Europe, whether we want to move towards Europe. And everyone needs to be very clear, very sure about where the country goes and where he will go together with the country. And a couple of more things to mention. We should understand and be cognizant of the fact that Ukraine should really look into possibilities of preserving possibilities of free trade arrangements, not just with the EU, but with Eastern and other countries. It is related to lots of things, both commercial and emotional, and these are the things that may not be easily judged in a very pragmatic way. On the other hand, they are strongly related with the tremendous losses Ukraine has sustained since the time of this wide-scale conflict. We should also be cognizant of the fact that the European market, at least in the short-term perspective, won't be able to make a full alternative to the Russian one. We should understand this. The Ukrainian export capacities of today, meaning the export to Russia, makes 23 to 25% of the total export capacity of the country, which is roughly equal to the scope of our exports to the EU. And this is a problem that needs to be tackled and needs to be resolved. Our free trade treatments with CIS countries and those regimes that will be imposed after the signing of these agreements are really comparable. Whatever they say in Moscow, whatever our former colleagues, now rather counteragents, speak in Moscow about, there will be some technical aspects of how to avoid, say, goods smuggling, how to avoid goods siphoning from the EU through Ukraine into Russia and other countries. But nevertheless, this is a huge agreement, an agreement of scale that does require a strong country and strong economic instruments at work in that country. So my only wish is for Ukraine is to reach the 27th of June when the agreement will be signed. And my another wish is that we have enough possibilities to launch very strong and very forceful reforms of our administrative and managerial machinery of the state to make it capable of swiftly and promptly reacting to minor changes in the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. Questions? Only on two questions. How, explain to me, procedures what procedures should Ukrainian companies should go through to participate in the market, EU market? Of course, EU isn't. Our agriculture is interested in cooperation with EU, but there are some industries which cannot provide their products to EU. How the state should work, how to compensate those who are employed in those industries. The agreement is for 1,000 pages with different editions. So I will not take a role of Wikipedia, which can answer any question. As to EU, at present, they have procedures of access to public procurement. So they are very simple. On one hand, it's qualification of companies, and on the other hand, for EU, European companies, that is different than from companies from third countries, and especially for those companies nobody knows about. There is a website of EU Commission. It's about public procurements in EU. As to public procurements on the level of the countries, then all those procedures are built on regulations of EU and unified, though with some exceptions in some industries, but that depends on goods. That's what I can say about this. As to industries and solutions for them, somehow it is opposite. When we sign an agreement about a free trade zone, free trade area, all of us, we take our things and we will run to Europe to sell our things on European market. No, it's just one more opportunity. And if you wanted to go to that market, you will do something. It's an alternative, like for any company. If they wanted to sell juice, for example, to Russia, it's clear that the labels should be in Russian and understandable. If I wanted to sell a juice in EU, at least it should be in English, or it's even better to localize that. If I know that it will be in Germany, then I should have the text in German. So that agreement gives an opportunity to choose. If you don't want to go there, you develop on your own. But on the other hand, we should understand that market economy means competition. Even if there is no EU, some companies become bankrupt. We don't have an agreement yet. We see that people sell something, people sell business, people sell something on the street, and I saw a very interesting announcement just on I sell a factory which produces formed coal. So that's a process, and that's a process we should not be afraid of. The problem is that when we don't have tough competition, we then monopolies develop, and a lot of problems. It's not a secret. Then medicine in supplies to Ukraine are monopolized. There is monopolized. We have 5-7 main companies. All the rest sub traders, and it's clear they can control anything, and they can control the prices. That's an issue which should be solved in our anti-monopoly committee and also through competition. That's why, in this sense, when we have several original distributors of medicine, like Germany without some others, that will be for the benefit of Ukrainian consumers. There is a part of import, and now we speak about export. If we speak about import, of course, a big part, we get different industrial goods, food products, and broadly used products, and we have different situations and as to different products. We have producers of textile that work on the level of development of providing raw materials. So they will not suffer They produce something anyway. They supply it to Europe. On the other hand, there will be some restructuring of the market. If more European footwear will come to Ukraine, then our national producers should be protected, or they should reorient. But all of this, and we will have to interfere into real-time mode. So today we should not say, it will be bad. Ensure, and if something happens, come to the national bank, we'll give you money. No. The agreement requires to develop the system of public assistance for that not to influence, to stop competition. And the last point, full-fledged realization of the agreement and is related to reforms. If we speak about the reforms of trade policy, I see two simple things we have to see. Simple things. First of all, we should start to realize what trade facilitation. We should implement them, and there's a toolkit and how to simplify trade procedures. You could have wonderful goods, but if it takes a week to pass through the customs, all our agreements don't make any sense. The second point, issues related to cooperation with business and also with promotion of Ukrainian goods abroad, and making good conditions for business, not only for exporters but also for importers. If we don't do those two things, it will be very bad. You inspired me. We should tell ourselves that Ukrainians are not proud not only in their spirit. We demonstrated that here on Maidan, but at the same time I believe that we should stop demanding technical assistance. If the government and if we as a country, if we don't spend money for our trade missions abroad, if the study is made through foreign money, if we don't work on information every day, then nothing good happens. All the countries of the world, big or small, they should know what globalization is, and on their own they should use international experience. Thank you. Igor, I have a question as a moderator, and from Ukraine Crisis Media Center. You are right that there are requirements and standards. There is also tasks and obstacles for us to get access to European markets and to use all the advantages from the agreement. As far as I remember, since 2005, Ukraine received lots of money from EU, big grants of technical assistance to adapt standards and to European directives. Where are we in this process? How long will it take Ukraine to harmonize our legislation for our producers to be able to use those advantages? Very good question, but it's very difficult to answer simply yes or no and when. There are standards, requirements used when you produce medicine. As far as I know, all internal regulatory documents, I don't speak about the customs, but just in this very narrow sense. Lots of those documents, that is a translation of regulations from EU or some other bodies and responsible for that. So we should not forget that in the agreement there is a reference not only to regulations of EU, but also to bodies that produce something. And international organizations, for example, some conventions that regulate the work of customs, but it's not EU that is responsible, but there is a World Customs Organization. So there is also such a nuance. So I believe that we should set order here, but that is quite a different nature of order. And to other industries, we understand that the biggest regulation is in agriculture and food goods, and as to machine building, there is no detailed requirements how a turbine should look like or a plane. That is said by someone who orders. There could be requirements to pollution, to the level of noise or something else, but those are elementary things we have to work on. On the other hand, when we produce certain goods, it's not about quality of end products. It can be green, white, narrow, it's up to you. But there could be requirements to components. For example, those who make footwear, there could be requirements to them, and those who supply hide. And there is a system of control over cancerogenic, pathogenic, mutagenic elements because of the problem of cancer fight for EU. That is a very important issue. If you don't meet those standards and if you don't register what you provide, that programs is here for 5-7 years, then you will not be able to come to that European market. So we should look at every industry. Who used that money? Someone did. It's a question of how technical assistance was used, and my advice would be it should be coordinated, it should be in order, and they should be more proactive. Of course, donors have their own agenda, and countries, because of political or economic ideas, support something or don't support something. And also we speak about electronics, requirements to electronics. There are requirements in EU, several regulations of EU or European Commission, and it's first of all about safety of low voltage equipment. So we should know how to produce it for access of children to be very limited, and there are some other requirements. As to, for example, agriculture, that is clear for Ukraine, the biggest difficulty. Now we're trying to resolve that, to introduce the system of tracking. In EU, it's very important to know not only about the product, like this is meat, such and such, with spice or without spice or something else, but to know a requirement to the whole history of that product. So we know from which cow that meat comes, what it ate, so controlling safety in many cases. And this is a modern trend, audited on the stage of technologies. So there are questions to technologies, not to the way they look like. If it looks bad, people will not buy it. And the last question.
The last question is inspired by your recent response. This is a mutual inspiration for us. Many citizens feel that as soon as the EU markets are open for Ukrainian produce, it will see a reverse flow, not just of quality European products, but also of some poor quality stuff, whether these feelings are grounded or not. Well, let us put it like that. Any attempts to smuggle low-quality products into the country, they have ever been and always been, and the attempts will be further on in the future. And by the way, for that purpose, the agreement provides for specific measures to be taken by the Ukrainian side to safeguard its market. Lots has to be done by joint efforts to create this, I'd say, super filters to weed out poor quality products. And we as experts, as journalists, will have to work actively with the public, explaining them the details. In my view, the problem of today is not in customs taxes, but because many of the European products that the EU would want to export to Ukraine, they're already here. And because of that, we may not expect any avalanche of new products coming into the country. Speaking of counterfeit produce, the struggle will continue and the fight will be stepped up. And the other thing is that it is not just about them exporting their produce to Ukraine, it is also about Ukrainians' buying capacity. Given the economic situation inside the country, we should think about how to provide our local consumers with possibility, with a range of choices, be it about foodstuffs or home electronic appliances or services. By the way, the agreement provides for huge measures to liberalize the services market in the country. Until recently, there has been a situation when foreign attorneys were not able to represent interests of Ukrainian citizens in courts. A couple of years ago, there was an attempt by Yanukovych representatives to invite a foreign barrister to a legal proceeding here, but he had to work through his Ukrainian colleague for that purpose. And now the situation might change with European lawyers being more free to work in Ukraine and vice versa. Same can be said, hopefully, about teachers. We may expect representatives of other jobs and professions coming into Ukraine to offer their services here. That way we will provide for a better level of competition, which will surely improve the overall level of services offered. And because of that, we should not see or regard this agreement as a magic wand. It is just an array of possibilities, and it is upon us whether we will be able to use these possibilities to their best. The worst case scenario will be if we lose this possibility, if we fail to use these options, if we show that we are really more ready for great feats in terms of independence rather than doing some more mundane job of improving the situation inside. Thank you. I'm sorry, I think there was another question pending. What are the areas, about that will require steps to improve quality of products? And how would you appreciate this economic situation in the country? Well, let us start with 2008, 2009, the time when Ukraine joined the WTO. We spoke about the WTO membership as an additional extra chance to improve our competitiveness and quality. But statistics-wise, the early results were the slump of the GDP and around 20% decrease in exports and imports likewise. So it is about countries' poor capacity to either export or import quality goods. That is all the steps and measures I've described. They work in certain economic and political conditions. A recent research carried out in the EU showed that any efforts to liberalize visa agreements with Ukraine will surely not lead to an avalanche of Ukrainians coming into Europe. And we see some changes in the moods of the public when, say, about half of the population in different regions of the country speaks strongly against an increase of migrants in the country. And politicians should recognize these moods. So, you know, speaking of the agreement itself, lots of nice things are told about the customs service, but if we don't do anything to change the customs service here, the agreement will remain an empty paper for us. Unfortunately, I'm not able to provide you with some glitzy details regarding that, but at least I can tell you that there is a project, an EU-funded project working in Ukraine, which deals with harmonization and approximation of the Ukrainian legislation to that of the EU. You can find more details about the project on EU delegation in Ukraine's website. They're dealing specifically with technical regulations, standards, meteorological aspects of cooperation, etc. As I'm not a Ukrainian politician, I won't take the liberty of trying to answer all of your questions. I'm sorry. Thank you, Igor. I think that's owing to you. We know a lot more about the free trade agreement now. Thank you, colleagues.